Dandavat Pranam. Thank you so much for joining us here on One on One. This is an initiative that's run by ISKCON Sydney, where we try to get to know more personally all the sadhus who visit us and inspire us already so much with their preaching activities, and hopefully can inspire us further by sharing their personal experiences in ISKCON. Just to start off with, I was just wondering if you could please share with us, for those of us who don't know, maybe the story of your life as you came to join ISKCON, who you were before, and then how you felt transformed after coming into contact.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. It's my great privilege to be here in Radha Gopinath Temple, Sydney. Very happy to meet all the wonderful devotees here. I was actually, you can say, born in a kind of devotee family. My parents were connected with Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and my grandparents and everyone actually in our family, they used to chant. They still chant actually Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Especially in the Bengal, most of the people, they follow Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but they are not strictly following those rules and regulations. And but from our childhood, we have been taught to worship only Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Jagannath Baladev Subhadra. That is kind of our family's worshipable deity, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Gaur Nitai primarily, and Radha Krishna sometime. We never actually worshipped demigods, which is quite prominent in Bengal especially. But in our family, since belongs to Gaudiya Vaishnavism, we never worshipped other demigods. And later on, when I was studying in university, so we visited ISKCON temple with one of my uncle, and then that's how we started our journey. And some devotees gave us some books, and then we started to read books, and our frequency actually increased. We are going every week almost to the temple, associating with ISKCON devotees, and that's how we started to join youth classes, because we were college students those days, and that's how we became connected with ISKCON. And then me and my uncle, both of them, we got quite involved with ISKCON. We took initiation, and in our family also, everyone gradually they became converted from like Gaudiya, so-called Gaudiya Vaishnavism to ISKCON. Now we have almost kind of 15 to 20 initiated devotees in our family. Everyone is practicing Krishna consciousness. And actually there was an interesting fact behind it. I remember later on devotees actually told me my father actually got a book, it's kind of teachings of Lord Chaitanya in Bengali long back, before we became Krishna conscious, maybe 20-30 years back. And every day actually that book was, the front side cover was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's picture, and back side was Srila Prabhupada's picture, as usual all the ISKCON books. So every day before going to school, me and my brother and sister, so used to go in front of to see the mirror, and the book was kept exactly on the desk. So later on I realized every day actually we are looking to Srila Prabhupada every single day for many years. And then later on when I became devotee, then devotees told, because you saw the Prabhupada, used to see Prabhupada every day, and by the mercy of Prabhupada actually you will become connected to ISKCON, you will become devotee. So that's the power of Srila Prabhupada books, as it says, kind of it works like an atom bomb. So anyhow it reaches, it will actually blast and it will create devotees.
Oh wow. And also there's a bit of a jump still from joining as a youth to then taking up brahmachari life. What sort of compelled you or drew you to fully go to that extent?
Okay. We are actually from the beginning of ISKCON, kind of I was very close to the brahmacharis, and then I used to be part of ISKCON Youth Forum. So primarily in Youth Forum we talks about brahmachari and brahmacharya, and to dedicate our life in the service of Srila Prabhupada and Krishna. And then later on when I actually took shelter to the lotus feet of my spiritual master, and he was telling actually basically that Prabhupada told him to offer this life in the service of Krishna. So that made me more convinced, although I decided earlier that I will remain brahmachari, because I was inspired by seeing the brahmachari devotees, their lifestyle. I practically have seen, although my parents are devotees, there are problems and conflicts, quarrels all the time, and they are in anxiety all the times, So I found this difficult for me actually to remain in a household life. So later when I met my spiritual master, then I became more convinced that I should actually accept brahmachari life. That will be more conducive for me. And especially I was inspired by one beautiful statement of Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur, and someone asked him that your father was a grihastha, then why did you become brahmachari? You should have followed your father. And then he says, I am ready to accept hundreds of wives, but I am not sure that I can make my offsprings devotee, my family members devotee. But my father, he could give that guarantee. That's why he became grihastha. So I found this life is more conducive for me. So similarly, I also realized that this life is more conducive for me. But I feel in ISKCON, grihastha, brahmachari, vanprastha, sannyas, everyone is qualified to get the pure love of Krishna.
You were talking about how impactful the youth outreach and the youth forums were. Have you found that the impact it had on you has inspired you to then further engage now in preaching to the youth rather than being the youth being preached to?
Yes, youths are actually future, Prabhupada says. And especially during Prabhupada's time, when Prabhupada started this mission in the USA, most of the actually members were youth. And Prabhupada did everything with young devotees those days. And it's our actually kind of Vaishnava tradition, it's kind of parampara. So the senior devotees, naturally they have to hand over the responsibilities to the young devotees, because the young devotees, they have innovative ideas, they have latest concept, then they are acquainted with modern style of living, so they can present Krishna consciousness in a modern way to others. So later on when I joined temple, very first service actually I started with the youth preaching. I assisted many devotees in youth preaching, and later on I actually took over one city to preach to the college students. And last almost 10-12 years I have been preaching there, apart from other preaching zones. And we have seen how kind of youths, especially in India, they give a good response to Krishna consciousness philosophy. And we have many of our students actually in last 10-12 years we have seen 200-300 students, mostly from engineering backgrounds. They became attracted to Krishna consciousness. They accepted this philosophy wholeheartedly, and many of them, at least from our preaching, kind of 20-30 students, they joined as a full-time devotee in temple. So we can see that power when we do youth preaching, and especially in youth preaching we realize when you do youth preaching, actually we can get congregation preaching also by default. For example, our students, those who accepted Krishna consciousness, many of their parents also, by seeing them, accepted Krishna consciousness. So it's kind of easier to approach youth, and by approaching them we can convince their parents also.
During your time doing youth preaching, have you found any challenges or sort of surprises that you didn't expect would come up?
Okay, like earlier actually, especially in India, devotees, they could go to the hostels, college premises with kind of saffron dress and a saintly dress. But nowadays colleges have become very strict, they don't allow so much. But many colleges they allow, but many prestigious institutions they don't allow saintly people with this dress to preach to their students. So I remember in the beginning when we started program in some colleges, they're very strict actually. They don't allow to meet with to mingle with their students. So I used to go kind of night time, and after 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock to the hostel to meet students with the saffron dress attire, And I remember in one incident specifically, the warden, he caught us, and I was about to enter into hostel. Then one student came from upstairs. He told the warden, he says, actually he's my elder brother. He joined temple. He became sannyas. He came to meet me. So that was quite memorable incident for me while doing youth preachings.
What other sort of means have you found to overcome that sort of barrier that's been built up in the more prestigious universities? You were saying they're a bit more hesitant to allow people to come in. How did you because we're finding that in lots of places, people are more averse to explicit devotional or explicitly spiritual people. How did you find you overcame that barrier?
Yeah, actually then we realized it's not actually good to go in devotee attire in some colleges and institutions, not everywhere. So then what we did, we told our senior students who already accepted this philosophy, some of them who took initiation already, chanting 60 rounds, but they're still doing their masters or PhD. So we used to send them rather than going ourselves to the colleges. So they used to go in their normal student dress, and they could easily mingle with all the students, and they would conduct programs in the hostels, big programs in front of their faculties, college directors. And college directors and faculty, they would appreciate also, because they are college students, same college, pass out students. Sometimes we would invite pass out students also. So that's how we are continuing now. And pass out students are basically cultivating the newcomers, new students for 5-6 months. And after that, they introduce temple devotees to the new devotees. So after 5-6 months has passed, then it's okay. They can understand that these people are from ISKCON, and they already started chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So after that, they start to come to our hostels, which we set up close to the college premises, and they can introduce to brahmacharis and devotees. And that's how actually we did that, solve the problem.
Yeah, so you were saying you've been doing youth preaching for quite a while now. Have you found any shifts in the general attitudes of the youth during that time, or do you find generally they present the same sort of issues?
Yeah, definitely a lot of changes actually I can see nowadays, especially as the technologies are advancing, the influence of Kali is actually increasing. The mindset of students is also changing. For example, when we used to preach earlier 15 years back, those students, they are quite simple, because they are not exposed to kind of modern technologies, devices, mobiles and other things, laptops. And now students, they almost they're busy with all these modern technologies, everything, and they're doing all the communications through all these things. So it's very difficult actually. These modern technologies are consuming actually a lot of their times. So earlier students used to have a lot of times for other things, so that used to be very useful. But also now because of all this time factor, all these issues, students develop this mindset that they want to live alone. Earlier students used to live together in a same room, lots of students. Even nowadays many Indian college hostels, they're providing single rooms for each student in their hostels. So it's very difficult when they stay alone. When they're with someone, then it's easier, but when they stay alone, it's very difficult, because they get into all kinds of sense gratificatory activities. So it kind of they become more materialistic. It's quite challenging actually. But of course we are also trying through different strategy to find out how to convince devotees to students, those who are kind of following this type of mindsets. So we are also trying to preach through them according to their and their ideology, through modern technologies, through like the way the college and institution teaches them. We are also trying to present Krishna consciousness similar way to them.
Could you share a specific sort of example of how you've addressed that sort of shift, like a specific strategy or program that you?
Yeah, for example, like a few years back, students, they are fond of kind of magazines, and because many other clubs in the colleges, they publish magazines. So we thought, why should not we establish magazines for our students? And then we started actually magazines for our students, and we're presenting kind of the kind of spirituality and science. Now we are presenting Krishna consciousness in a scientific way to the students. And then we are using all the technology. For example, we are using websites, Facebook IDs, and we do even camps for the students. Like outside the students, they go for picnic and others. We also do similar kind of programs and to different locations, and we sometimes take them to tour in different spiritual pilgrimages. So that's how basically we are trying to reach to the students.
And also in this preaching, we've obviously benefited now. You've been traveling a bit doing preaching. Have you found the youth outreach has to shift to be effective in different countries? Or do you find the same sort of approaches work in all sorts of different places?
Definitely it has to be different as per time, place and circumstances. So, and that's what actually Prabhupada says, we have to present Krishna consciousness per time, place and circumstances. We can't apply what we are applying exactly as it is. What we are doing in India, we can't apply in other countries because the students and culturally they are different, So therefore, according to them, we have to present Krishna consciousness. Just like when Prabhupada was preaching, he was like, he was preaching to the Western people in a certain way, and when he came to India, he was dealing with them in a certain way. So we have to basically, do the kind of environmental screening and environmental scanning, and by which you can get to know how is their mindset, what they like, what is their needs, what is their interest, what is their concern, and accordingly you have to present Krishna consciousness. And that is actually beauty of our Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. So we can present in any condition, anywhere, in any situation. So we have to just become a little intellectual to present according to the time, place and circumstances.
Personally, is there any shift or difference between the circumstances you've noticed, maybe between the youth in India or the youth in Australia or in another Western country?
Yeah, I mean in India also in different states. For example, students are very religious. We have seen in many colleges, students comes from very kind of remote area, village background, and they are very religious. They are very pious. So after a few interactions, you can easily introduce chanting or this the deep Krishna conscious philosophy. But in Western countries, we can't in the beginning introduce Krishna conscious philosophy directly, or we can't force them in the beginning that to start chanting and other things. We have to gradually, we have to mix with them. We have to give them nice, taking care, prasadam, or in a simple Krishna consciousness philosophies. We have to invite them for our programs. So both approaches are different.
Yeah. Okay. I was just wondering, beyond the actual youth outreach, are there any other projects within ISKCON that you particularly are passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, along with youth preaching, I was quite involved with management. So from the beginning of management, beginning up my journey, I was involved with management. I was involved in Ujjain temple, Madhya Pradesh, India. I was managing that temple. So and that was quite challenging, and at the same time quite wonderful also. And then later on I moved to USA by the instructions of my spiritual master, and there also I was managing one project in Florida, USA. So yeah, so youth preaching is quite different than managing temple devotees in the temple premises, because a lot of challenges comes, but we can learn a lot from that also, which you can actually apply in our preaching also. So I found it's quite kind of interesting to have both together, management and preaching Krishna consciousness. When we preach, we reach to the outside people. That gives us kind of that makes us actually more humble, which you can apply in management also. Because for management we have to sometimes become very hard and strict. So when we go to outside people, then we can understand our real position. And apart from youth preaching, I did many other services. For example, I was in book distribution, traveling Sankirtan party for 2 years almost. So I used to go like most of them North Indian states in every corner, from central India till kind of Himachal states. We used to go every city, small cities, used to go for book distribution, and used to go to the every doorsteps, every shopkeepers, and all the offices, government colleges, schools. And that was really wonderful, book distribution. I was also doing kind of DTRship for quite a long time, along with all these things, and then cooking for the deities. So it's kind of I love to cook for the deities and devotees.
I was just wondering if you could share some of the challenges and lessons you said you experienced and then learned from that had a relevance to the multiple different services you were taking up.
Yeah, mainly in I shared, I think, for youth preaching, some challenges. For management, I think you meant for management, some challenges. Now there are a lot of challenges actually, because it's difficult actually to satisfy all the devotees needs actually. And actually, it actually shows how it's difficult to actually take care of all the devotees. Every time I read Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's first times, that shows Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to manage so many devotees in Jagannath Puri and Navadvip, and everyone actually they are satisfied. Even Srila Prabhupada's time also, Prabhupada was almost satisfying everyone, satisfied their needs. So particularly sometimes devotees, and they get into conflict with each other. So many times it happens most of the time in our meetings we discuss these issues. Sometimes devotees say in deity department, sometimes in a kitchen department, two devotees get into conflict because of their misunderstanding, miscommunications, and it's very difficult to resolve those problems, especially nowadays, because everyone is so determined in their own ideology, and everyone actually thinks that I am the right, the way I understood is very perfect. So that's why it's quite challenging actually to give resolution. And many times we found even after giving resolutions, it's still the relationship does not actually develop so deeply. So that's quite challenging in management. Especially we saw that once the negativity develops between two devotees, is very difficult, especially nowadays, to come back to again positive attitude. So therefore we have to become simple hearted. We have to pray to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, pray to spiritual master Srila Prabhupada, so that we can maintain positive relationship with all the devotees in our society. And another challenges in management which I faced many a times, that is kind of lack of cooperations in devotees, which is everywhere actually. And Prabhupada actually emphasized in his last will, he says, your love for me will be shown how you are cooperating with each other. And it's really challenging to cooperate with everyone. We can easily cooperate with someone who is favorable to us, and it's very difficult to cooperate who is not favorable to us. But in our movement, since it's a big movement and there are a lot of diversity, people came from different backgrounds, so we have to adjust with everyone. We have to cooperate with everyone for the higher purpose, for the sake of Srila Prabhupada, for the sake of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this movement. We have to actually remain united all the time.
I was just wondering if there's any other projects now, maybe that you yourself aren't engaged in, that you'd like to see the other devotees pick up, or if there's any project in particular you think we should put more emphasis in ISKCON in general. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, actually, in ISKCON, all the projects are very important. Prabhupada emphasized on each and every aspects of preaching. Sometimes Prabhupada used to emphasize on college preaching is most important. Sometimes Prabhupada used to say book distributions, most important. Sometimes temple, kind of construction most important. Sometimes Prabhupada used to say even congregation development important, farm communities are important. I think we have to give importance to all these aspects in our Krishna consciousness movement, because devotees for example, devotees, everyone may not like same projects, so you have to engage devotees from different backgrounds. So that's why all these things are needed, DTRship, book distribution, college preaching, congregation outreach. So I think whatever Prabhupada actually did during his time, we should simply follow that Prabhupada footsteps. But definitely, if we find in particular any particular temple some projects are lacking, some preaching projects are lacking to put more emphasis, then we should care about that.
Are there any specific projects that you would encourage people to take up, or would you say that varies more on a temple by temple basis?
I think it's temple by temple basis, or also city by city basis.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I personally feel, since I am quite involved with youth preaching, that if we give more emphasis to the youths, then the temple, the project will flourish more actually. Because more we get youth involvement, more and temple environment become vibrate, because youth has energy, they have that stamina, and they have actually that power to do things.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're gonna wrap up soon. Just to end the interview on a sweet note, I was wondering if there's any heartfelt message you could share, not just for the devotees in Sydney, but for the devotees all around the world.
I mean, personally believe that the advancement in spiritual life is solely depend on the mercy of devotees. And we find actually in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's first times, all the devotees, and they are actually serving each other. So since this is Vaishnava culture, and then also Rupa Goswami says in Upadeshamrita that we should have 6 types of exchanges between devotees. That will kind of that will deepen our bond between each and other devotees, and therefore, like Prabhupada says that no outside enemy can harm anything to our society, but internal conflict can destroy these things. And we have the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's first time, that because devotees were united, all the associates were united, but when Chadkaji attacked Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's devotees Sankirtan movement, and all of them together, they actually defeated Chadkaji. So the Krishna consciousness movement, definitely it will become successful, as Srila Prabhupada says, it will be for 10,000 years. But it's our duty to remain united, to remain cooperated, and then to serve Vaishnavas, and that way we can actually serve Srila Prabhupada more nicely, and then we can contribute to this great movement, Hare Krishna movement.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.